Let's face it, you are more than a resume. You have a personality and things about you which just cannot be captured on paper. On this podcast, we are working to humanize the hiring experience by giving you a voice. So let's talk, learn from one another, and find that next great opportunity. I'm your host, Eric Ryan Jones, and this is Fire Before Christmas. Welcome, everybody, to another exciting edition of the Fired Before Christmas podcast. Today, my guest is Mr. Brent Baldwin, who is a digital marketer with Globetrotters. Well, should say was a digital marketer with the Globetrotters. He recently went from furloughed to unemployed. So like many of you out there, he's playing the game right now of trying to figure out what his next step is and where he wants to go. So, Brent, why don't you tell the listening audience just a little bit about yourself and where you're coming from?
Yeah, so I am probably a unique marketer to your listening base. I delve in the world of brand marketing, which usually means it's really heavy on strategy. So taking a lot of information, data, research from the insights and analytics teams at companies and crafting and building strategy that the consumer marketing teams execute against. So what that actually means is I'm the one that says, hey, we should run Facebook ads. And then somebody decides what our Facebook ads will actually be optimized against and how we'll build profiles on social lookalikes and things like that. I'm also very unique in that I am a balance of a right-brained person and a left-brained person. So I'm very analytical and data-oriented. I got my start actually in research. I was a focus group moderator for about 5 years, living out of a suitcase. That was not fun. But I quickly kind of transitioned and parlayed from that into a little bit more of a creative and the brand side role. So I like to say that I blend my heart, my head, and then over my 20 years of experience, I started blending my gut instincts when I make decisions.
That's cool. So you were out on the road before doing these focus groups, and then you transition into this whole different world. That's a pretty big transition. How did you make that leap? What was it that allowed you to go from just leading focus groups to actually getting into more of what you desired, I guess I should say?
Yeah, I was, when I was moderating focus groups, I had a really fun client. Well, it was a healthcare company, so it wasn't a fun client, I should say, but it was a really fun project in which we were doing some of the very first wearable connected fitness trackers. And they were targeting them at kids. So it was, how do we tackle obesity? Well, we gamify and make the idea of exercising fun. So they were integrating it with video games, making little wearable devices and things. And I really kind of fell in love with the idea of kids and family marketing. And from there, I had a great introduction and landed at Cartoon Network. And so I was in a little bit more of a traditional research role at Cartoon Network, but I interfaced. Half of my day was spent in meetings with my marketing counterparts, both on the consumer marketing side and on the brand marketing side, and then the traditional digital marketers. And so I really kind of felt a calling towards that. And I think they kind of started shifting me into a role where I was more liaison between research and marketing. And then ultimately they kind of stole me away and turned me into a full-term marketer. So it was something that was appealing to me. It was a way that I could kind of scratch that creative side and feel like I'm doing more of the front end work as opposed to just kind of the evaluative work on the back end like I was doing for research.
Okay, so you got started with Cartoon Network, and that's where your brand marketing career really started to lift off. Where did you go after Cartoon Network?
Yeah, so I had the privilege of working with Anna, Elsa, Olaf, as well as Mickey Mouse. I went down to Florida. We're based out of Atlanta, but we had a short little 2-year jaunt down in Florida, and I was working with Disney on Ice, running their brand marketing team, right about the time that Frozen came out. So for 35 years, Disney on Ice had been sold by Mickey, Minnie, Daisy, Donald, Goofy, what they called the Fab Five, and whatever happened to be the hot movie of the time. And all of a sudden, Anna, Elsa, and Olaf were just these polarizing, magnetic characters that were on fire. And they had to redo their entire strategy, their entire structure, and make sure that they were giving equal weight to Mickey was. And so I led a lot of those efforts working on Frozen on Ice. I mean, it was the movie made for Disney on Ice. Going around, traveling the country, seeing packed arenas was pretty interesting and pretty exciting. And definitely I was the star dad to my oldest daughter at that point. We'd get to go down into into the rehearsal hall where they had just a giant sheet of ice where they would rehearse the shows, and bring my daughter in on the weekend. And, the skaters would come up and talk to her like they were in character. Like, oh my gosh, so great that you're in Arendelle, So it was definitely fun and rewarding, but it was challenging taking a marketing strategy that had been locked in place for essentially 35 years and turning it on its head. And I kind of fell in love with that process. I did a similar thing when I was at Cartoon Network without even really knowing it. While I was there doing some of the brand marketing was around the time that Netflix stopped shipping DVDs and started streaming to your computer. And Hulu was coming. Like, the concept of TV everywhere was really in its kind of formative months and days. And Cartoon Network was trying to figure out where they should go, where they should be part of that. And what they realized, being kind of a boys 6 to 11 audience, was that games was that second screen opportunity. So you could sit there and play a game of the characters that you are watching on TV. So it was kind of, how does Cartoon Network adapt to this TV everywhere environment, which was different than what Disney was doing and Nickelodeon, their direct competitors. So I really love getting into kind of murky, messy situations and making sense from them. I really love getting into supplanted ways of doing things and challenging it and kind of questioning why. Like, why do we always do that? Why do we cut the ends off of the ham? Well, because the hams were always too big for grandma's sheet pans, and that's how she taught us to do it. I'm really love questioning why, and kind of turning the concept of how we've always done things on its head.
That's really cool. Well, the marketing for the Disney on Ice must have worked really well, because I know my two daughters were taken to the show every year it came to town here in Atlanta. So we did at least 2 or 3 tours of that show, and they definitely enjoyed it. I did not know that it used to be just around the Fab Five, as you say, and then transition into this Arendelle thing. It felt to me like that's the way it always been. So kudos to all of you. That sounds really cool and really interesting. What was probably the biggest challenge, though, of that transformation? I mean, you're taking very iconic characters here, to your point, these Fab Five, these ones that everybody knows about, and trying to then bring a couple of characters that a generation sees a lot of value in, but not their entire market, I would say, probably saw the value in those characters.
Yeah, it was interesting because, my wife and I actually sat down and watched Frozen. Like, I think we rented it from Redbox after the original theater fad had gone by, and we watched it and kind of just went, okay, well, that was interesting. And then, a year later, it's on the iPad. My oldest daughter's got in the back seat, and she's belting every song, like every kid does. And that's when it kind of clicked, and we got Frozen. Like, we didn't get it until that point. And in embracing that concept, I think was a big key. And the success that we had was that it really was around the music. It really was about seeing your children expressing themselves. Did you choose to be Anna? Did you choose to be Olaf? It did kind of gravitate a little bit towards girls, but there was kind of enough action and suspense, and the big marshmallow monster that all the boys loved. So it was kind of exciting, and it helped us kind of balance the gender roles there. But the challenges that we found was, Disney does such an amazing job building brands and building brand standards that was hard for us. And Mickey and Minnie and those Fab Fives are the only ones that kind of live in any world and yet don't live in a world at the same time. So you can see them in the parks, and you can see them placed into any country in the world as part of a short that they've done on YouTube. But they could also show up in Arendelle or in any other kind of the magical lands. But Anna and Elsa live in Arendelle, and they can't go anywhere else. Everywhere that they happen to be happens to be Arendelle. So it was, how do we blend these two things, and at the same time not isolate or kind of like lose the history and the past of so many of the other kind of classic Disney princesses and the Pixar characters and things like that. So they were very, very stringent. We would go to the parks and have meetings with them in the early days, and the actors and actresses that would play Anna and Elsa, even behind closed doors when there was only 5 of us in there, would not break character. They would never tell us, how heavy is your cape? Oh, well, it's made of ice and and Elsa's magical, so it's weightless to her, is the type of thing that Anna would say. So it was, how do we play with these kind of what seem like ridiculous standards, and create a new concept? And what was great was that it's such a multi-generational property that grandma and grandpa loved the idea of taking their kids to see it, even if they didn't get Frozen. What they got was sitting next to their kid and watching them sing and yell and stuff themselves with popcorn and cotton candy and way overpriced flashy light things, and just really have a great experience for an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah, my kids love the bubble wands. That's what got us.
Yeah.
Those were the fun ones.
It used to drive me crazy because I could order them from our concessions team at cost for video shoots and things, and then I would go to the shows myself with my kids and go, "Gosh, I know how much this costs. I can just not justify spending $40 on it." You know? But we always did. I mean, that's the magic of those environments. You know,
Yes.
you built up on emotion, and you just do anything and everything your kid wants to keep them happy. So
yes, it does. So and you kind of your career, it seems like it's kind of grown up, as it would be, because you went from cartoons to more older childlike things to the Harlem Globetrotters, and that's definitely something for all of ages, because I can remember being a young kid and seeing the Harlem Globetrotters out there and all the amazing tricks that they would do, and going to see a show. And even now in my 40s, you know, the idea of the Harlem Globetrotters to me just still holds a very special heart to me. So how did you move from the Disney world into the Globetrotter world?
Yeah, I took a short pit stop along the way, brought me back to Atlanta, worked for a small toy company, working with Wendy's and Chick-fil-A and Lowe's, kind of doing the premium toys. And while I was there, I really kind of honed what I would call my strategist chops. So how do I really take information from our client, understand what their needs are, and how do we build strategy so that we can execute against that? And that was one of the things that I think was attractive to the Harlem Globetrotters for me to join them, was now have about 12 years of experience in the kid and family space, which works great for the Harlem Globetrotters. Was able to lead brand marketing efforts for, one of the largest touring companies in the world at Feld Entertainment that runs Disney. And then also kind of understood the consumer products side of it, having been at Stratman, the toy company that I was at. It made perfect sense for me to kind of come in and join, because the Harlem Globetrotters are 94, almost 95 years old now. Have entertained, hundreds of millions of fans all across the world. I think it's 124 countries and counting now. But they were at one of those pivot points. They were at one of those points where they had been private equity for several years. So, basically a holding company had owned them for 12 years, and it had just devalued the brand, really tried to take an extreme cost-cutting focus, and suck every penny they could out of the organization. And then about 5 years ago, they were acquired by Hershey Family Entertainment, and they really started investing in the brand again. And so it was a great time for me to kind of come in and take that to the next step. So it was also time for them to pivot their strategy. For so many years, they had been basketball first as an organization. I mean, when you think of the Globetrotters, you do think of basketball, and probably think of Curly Neal, taking his hook shot from about 40 feet behind the arc or whatever it was. Or, maybe you're a newer generation and you remember Big Easy and how he was on The Amazing Race, for a couple of seasons and fell in love with the Globetrotters. Really what the Globetrotters was and is at their heart is family entertainment. And it is that, taking your kid to maybe their first basketball game forever. A basketball game where they're going to be treated to some amazing showmanship, some dunks, all sorts of talent and really great things. But there's also going to be some gags and some laughs and some fun. So it's a little bit different than going into an NBA game or maybe even a college basketball game, because it's much more appealing to 4 or 5-year-olds. So a lot of what I did when I joined the Globetrotters was reposition the brand and say, okay, we're not losing basketball. That's our DNA. That's our heritage. That's our history. But we're going to put a family image and a family message first to attract those families that also love basketball. And, and it had a great effect. We stopped kind of doing our social media posts that were all just about an amazing trick shot. And it was more about highlighting the experience that you would have, not just what you see on the court, but what happens in the stands, in the arena. So a lot of turning the camera around and focusing on the child and on the parent, and when they laugh and when they squeal and when they hug and they smile. And a lot of that was based on my Globetrotters experience as a kid. I mean, one of my kind of foundational moments of my youth is leaving the now demolished Omni Arena in downtown Atlanta with my dad after going and seeing a Globetrotters game, and walking out. And I don't really remember who played. I know the Globetrotters won because they're pretty much undefeated since the early 80s. But I remember holding his hand, walking out of the arena, looking up at him, feeling loved, feeling empowered, feeling like he chose to dedicate this time on a Saturday afternoon with me, and that he picked something that I knew we would have so much fun together. So I kind of thought that's such an amazing, memorable experience that I had, that I wanted to, number one, recreate that for my daughters, which I was lucky enough to get to do this past year, but also try to recreate that same experience for every father and every mother and every child, around the world.
So, in all your explanations here, from the Cartoon Networks and the Disney and the Globetrotters and even the toy company, one theme that keeps reoccurring is that idea of heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's something that you're very passionate about, is the heart and the emotion of things. Can I talk a little bit about how you feel that has made you a better brand marketer in general?
Yeah, I think, early on in my career, um, I was working on a pro-social campaign, a bullying prevention campaign, actually, for Cartoon Network. And it was right around the time of the Ice Bucket Challenge. And everybody was, all these things were getting millions of likes and views. And there was kind of became the concept of something going viral. And we had a very similar idea of what we wanted our campaign to be. We just got beat to the punch by ALS. And I'm glad they did, because it raised a lot of awareness and a lot of money. So we went ahead with our plans, and we wanted to get 1 million people to say they would speak up if they saw bullying occur. And so we had campaigns on social media, we had campaigns on air, we had partnered with Boys and Girls Club, we got celebrities, I mean, we even got the Kardashians to participate in this. And I remember that I was chasing that metric of 1 million. I had built this really extravagant spreadsheet where I was going in and I was pulling the analytics from Facebook, and I was looking at posts, and I was we had built a UGC platform where you could share a video and tell us you were going to speak up. And I was downloading those, 2 and 3 times a day. And I would go back to our VP and I'd go to our team and I'd go like, we're so close. We're so close. And I was losing sight. One of my coworkers saw that this was happening, and she handed me a letter that somebody had handwritten. A kid, about a 7-8-year-old kid, had written, basically saying thank you, that they feel empowered now, that they can go and they could talk to a teacher, or if they were in a situation, they saw it happen, or the next time somebody picked on them, they felt like they now knew what to do when this happened, as opposed to punching back or running away or feeling scared. And, they had drawn a picture of them in the halls and saying, I speak up. And it just kind of like, it cut to my core. I mean, it made me realize that while the data and the metric of 1 million was important, because it helped expand our reach and it helped, maybe meant that more kids would feel empowered to do this, but it really kind of reminded me that if all we got out of this campaign was we touched this one kid, and we were able to feel that kid felt empowered, felt stronger, felt like they could do something they needed to do, that we had success. And that kind of spurred that heart for emotion-driven marketing for me. I feel that data and analytics is great. I mean, that I have that background. I am the person that is, constantly churning and saying, if I do this, what's my success rate going to be? But I feel like the emotion is what sets us apart. I mean, I think the reason that the people choose to go to the Globetrotters is because they know they're going to have this emotional 2-hour experience that's going to remind them of an experience they had with their parents or with their grandparents. They're going to feel great about themselves. They're going to feel great as a parent. They're going to feel happy for their kids. Very similar to the experiences that they would have with Disney on Ice. And I love creating those moments, and I love creating kind of just that energetic feeling that happens there.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, the idea of emotional capital is such a big thing. I mean, even in the startup world, which I've got quite a bit of experience with and have gotten into recently, as this podcast has kind of broached me into startups, and this came out of a startup clinic that I did, and one of the values there that I was finding is that a lot of startups now, rather than striving to sell their product and sell X number of units, they're more about building a community first.
Mm-hmm.
So build a community around podcasters, build a community around bullying, and then from there, see what products come out of it. See what that community drives and that community wants, as it would be. And that's such a different way of thinking. And I think we're seeing more organizations move to that emotional capital, which is really good to see. So what are some predictions that you would have for organizations now that either want to or need to move towards this kind of way of thinking?
I think one of the great advantages of taking an emotional approach to your marketing is it removes some of the feature and product driven elements. So one means you don't have to lead with your price. You don't have to say we're $9.99 and the other guys are $10.99, so buy us. Because if the other guys are $10.99 and you're $199, but your product connects and is enriching and fulfilling, you're going to spend that extra money. You're not selling on we're blue, or you're not constantly having to say, now we have blue, now we have red, now we have green. Because to that point, when you draw somebody in with emotions, it makes them feel like they're part of your tribe, part of your community. I mean, it's interesting. I think about some of the brands on social media that they do such a good job with their advertising, where I kind of feel like they're still a startup and they're talking to just me, even though I know they're a large brand. And it's been probably 4 or 5 years since this happened, but like, as odd as it seems, like Simply Safe, a security company, felt like that to me. I mean, their original campaign, when they were really going mass market and bringing a different type of product, was not that their product was different than any other security system. It was just that feeling of, don't you want to protect your family? Don't you want to, in a very simple and easy way, protect your family? And I was like, man, those guys, like, they know me, they know my heart, they know my soul. And so when we were looking for products, I was considering them over a traditional product, because if it's, and I'm not going to badmouth other security companies, but it's, hey, our monitoring's $14.99 a month. That's great, but that doesn't, that just puts you in the commodity of everybody else. So make sure brand your product a commodity as opposed to something true and something unique. And so, I think organizations are going to continue to go this route, or they're going to start doing this route. We're really primed as consumers because we're all staying at home because of COVID. We're all, we're all still dealing with the Me Too movement that really was at its height a year or two ago. We're right in the midst of the Black Lives Matter, really kind of gaining hold, even though, again, it started 5-6 years ago. And so, as consumers, we want brands that stand for something. We'll sit at night and watch TV, and I'll see 3 car commercials, and you can close your eyes, and they're all exactly the same. It's all, in this new normal, we're making it easier to still give us money, and we're going to come to your house and bring you the car instead of coming to our dealership. But a brand like Subaru says, hey, don't forget, we stand for giving back to charities that we feel are doing good. And so when you buy a car from us, we're going to continue to donate, and we're going to donate even more now. So it's not, they're not even feeling like they have to do this in this new normal, or staying apart doesn't mean being apart. I mean, there's all these cliches and taglines that kind of started to develop at the beginning of marketing around COVID-19. And while it feels like it's emotional marketing, it's just kind of like blah. It really frustrates me as a marketer and as a brand leader, but there's a lot of them that are doing good things, and there's a lot of them that are actually kind of following up with what they're doing. So if you take the Black Lives Matter movement, like, it's great that Nike gave all their employees Juneteenth as a holiday, but if that's all they do, it's just lip service and it's just for the press. I mean, I'm actually seeing smaller companies that are making tangible and actionable steps. It's a small creative agency that I really like these guys. And every day the founder says, okay, step number 26, here's what we're now doing as an organization. And today's was that they're going to let every employee expense 2 books a year that talks about either gender equality or racial equality. And so they're specifically putting their money where their mouth is to benefit and better their employees, because they know that sphere of influence, they can do some good. And even if they just impact the 40 people's lives of their agency, hopefully that'll have the exponential effect. So great that you gave them a day off of work, but it's almost like Martin Luther King Day. We've all had that holiday for so long, but do we really take the time to reflect on what an amazing leader he was and the change and the catalyst that he was for improving people's lives, especially in the Deep South where you and I are? So I say all of that, a really long-winded answer to what seemed like a simple question, is that I believe that brands are going to invest in emotion-driven marketing more. I just really hope they do it in a way that correlates with what their purpose is. So Subaru does it with, hey, we're going to do some emotional driven marketing, but it's tied to our purpose. Ford's purpose has never been making it easier to buy a car. I don't even know what their purpose is as a brand, but you do know what Zappos' purpose is. Their purpose is, to put shoes on the feet of children all around the world. So every time you buy a pair, they donate a pair. Bombas does the same thing with socks. I mean, when brands take the time to figure out what their purpose is, it makes their emotional driven marketing so much easier to come to light and so much easier to kind of connect with customers.
No, that's a great answer. I mean, regardless of the length of it, I think it spoke to a lot of really good points and topics, and it kind of makes you start to think about the whole job search in general. And we've had conversations about this in the past, and how a lot of marketing people and a lot of even salespeople and others, their resumes are speckled with achievements that are all data driven.
Mm-hmm.
I saved the company X million dollars. I managed X number of people. I increased profits. I moved us from this office to that office. All these different tangible things, but we never see anything on a resume where it talks about, I just really loved the value system that the company had, and that made me want to show up and go to work every day. So how could we take this idea of emotional brand marketing and kind of parlay that into our job search? Is there something that you feel like people could be doing either on their LinkedIn, their resumes, or some other format that would really help them to kind of stand out and speak volumes to that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing you can do is be vulnerable, transparent, and honest. I mean, let's be honest, our resumes are probably the biggest lie that we tell in a public or semi-public forum. I mean, they're at least based in truth, but I mean, come on, like 11.1% gets rounded up to 12 because that sounds better, but
or 20
or 20, yeah, hey, round it up, make it look good. Nice even numbers, easier to read. But one of the things that I'm doing as part of my search and as part of a new venture that I'm starting myself is being values based and being transparent and being honest and talking about myself in a different way. So my resume is filled with, hey, I repositioned XYZ brand and it increased sales 12%. Because some of those things you need to get past the filters and some of the HR recruiting managers that are bombarded with things, they're trained to look for some of those things. But my experience, the way that I have gotten my best jobs was when I was honest and when I was transparent and I talked about some of those values and some of those needs, some of those change. I'm really big on working for companies and brands that stand for good, that do good work, that do good things. And I talk a lot about that. And I talk a lot about kind of the EQ, the emotional intelligence that I get out of every task or every project that I've worked on, just as much as the tangible results. So, going back to my example that I shared earlier, the chase for 1 million, people saying they would speak up, my emotional intelligence rose significantly in that project and really kind of changed the trajectory of my career. But we did, quote, meet our 1 million goal. We actually went to about 1.2 million, and it was a really big deal, and we celebrated it. And it was in my goals as something that I achieved and was a success metric and related to my bonus. So I want to talk about those things as well. When everybody is saying I raised sales 12% or I decreased our expenses by X%, you need something different to stand out. You need that unique thing. And talking about your successes, talking about your failures, talking about the things that you learned, I think is a unique way to really set yourself apart in this environment. And as I'm talking to other brand leaders that are hiring, that's what they're looking for. I mean, you obviously have done something right to have been in your prior positions, but what makes you the right fit for me? What makes you the right fit for my organization? I was at a conference in February, and one of the leaders of the parent company that owns Burger King and Tim Hortons and everything was talking, and he was saying, we are an extreme results oriented organization, and we work you to death. And it is not uncommon that 60 hours is the minimum, but they pay really, really well. They give stock options to every intern when they walk in the door. And so a lot of these people will probably retire at 40 with a multi-million-dollar portfolio, but they chose to commit themselves for 20 years to working tirelessly. So, that would not be the right fit for me. I could provide a lot of value to Burger King based on my experience, but that does not mean it would be the right fit for me because I'm never going to give you 60, 80 hours a week because my family is a priority and it's one of my core values. So I think the more that you talk about that in some unique way through your resume, through the interview process, one of the deliverables that I created for myself is actually a persona. So I went and I took and said, from the day I was born until today, what are a lot of the major milestones in my life? So it's, hey, I won the Gwinnett County Pinewood Derby Championship when I was in elementary school. And that was pretty cool and pretty exciting for a second, third grade or whatever. So I put it on my persona, maybe a hiring manager was a Boy Scout and we've got something that we can talk about. I talk about some of the really fun and cool things I've done in my career, carrying a clipboard, walking into a 7-Eleven at 4 a.m. and interviewing people about what they drink in their coffee and things like that. I mean, it's just kind of interesting little nuggets and tidbits. And then I give you some personality things about me. I love barbecuing and, have a smoker that something's constantly on every couple of days. What TV shows am I watching with my wife? What TV shows are my kids watching? What are some of my shopping behaviors? Things like that. I mean, to really give a look and an understanding of who Brent Baldwin is as a person. And it helps you understand me better. But another great thing is, and this happened actually when I was interviewing with the Globetrotters, was at that time my Netflix binge was Schitt's Creek, and I was watching it through like Pop TV, and I loved it, and the hiring manager loved it too, and we instantly connected. It had something to talk about for like 15 minutes, and it just it gave us one of those connection points that was more than, hey, at my last job I helped create 3 new toy lines, and one of them is going to be in Target in the fall. Exciting and interesting, but I think they expect that you've done those things by the time you get into certain positions like I am.
I want that. I mean, to be perfectly honest, that persona thing, I want the persona thing. That is really, really cool. As someone that is big into, personality tests and temperaments and just understanding people in general and the whole cultivation of this podcast is to get to know people and to see people beyond their resume. That whole idea of a persona and doing something like that is really cool. It's funny because I've started to recognize businesses on LinkedIn and other media channels by their persona. And it's nothing about what they sell. There's a company on LinkedIn right now that I'm following, the CEO and a bunch of other people. And their industry is an industry I have absolutely no interest in, from a sense of I need it. it's a fascinating industry, but it's not an industry that I would ever find myself utilizing. But I follow all these people because I'm getting to know them from an emotional standpoint. And I know that as soon as someone comes to me, because I'm bound to get asked as a consultant and just as an IT guy, hey, do you know anybody that does X? Without a doubt, it's immediately going to be like, oh, yeah, you need to go talk to this company over here. And I don't know anything about their process, their sales, their pricing, or anything, but I know everything about their culture and their people. And to me, that speaks magnitudes, to do that. So I think that's a really, really cool idea for people to go out and do personas.
If it's Mary Kay and you're embarrassed to say it, I know somebody at Mary Kay I can introduce you to. So, but they're a former client from days gone by. But
thank you. Yes, my mother was a Mary Kay, so I've got my connection there, as it would be. So I appreciate that.
I'm a melancholic blue, by the way. So
okay.
Yeah, I love the temperaments. I love one of the books that Kathleen Edelman put together where she translated it to colors and things. I love how that's been simplified, and we use the temperaments in our house too, how to parent our children. My wife is green. My oldest is yellow, super high energy, excited. My youngest is red. So my youngest being a red, which means she's very extroverted, very task oriented. If she's not eating her dinner, hey Madison, bet you can't eat those last 4 chicken nuggets in 1 minute. I mean, competition works with her. We've learned these things. So I'm right there with you on the temperaments and personality tests. So
yep, I'm a green. My wife's a yellow. I have a red daughter, and I have a yellow green daughter as well. So. Okay. Yeah, we're all over the place on that one. So, yeah, we know Kathleen very well. She's a very good friend of ours, and we love what she's done with the temperaments. So that's good to hear. Hopefully someone listening to this podcast will go out there and start Googling temperaments now and checking it out as well, because it is a very cool tool and utilization and everything.
I said this, you heard that. We'll plug the book. It's worth it.
There you go.
Go buy it.
Go buy it.
We get no commissions, but it's worth it.
Yes. Links will be in the show notes, and unfortunately I do Amazon referrals there, so if you click the link, you'll help out the podcast a little bit.
Okay, which is always good. Paid. I'm not getting paid.
You're not getting paid on it yet. I'm working on that though. I want to work to. I would love to get to a point where this podcast has enough listeners and activity that I'm able to do a profit share with all that kind of stuff. I mean, right now the profit share wouldn't even be worth it because there is no profits, and any sales that I do get, we're talking $1 or $2, and at a 25-cent check to Brent Baldwin right now, the stamp costs more. Future plans. So speaking of plans, what is next for Brent? You were furloughed, and unfortunately the furlough turned into unemployment. So what are you doing now?
Number one, I'm trying to breathe.
Good.
I mean, I think it's important to kind of own that this sucks. And there's anger in the situation, not anger at the company, but just anger at the situation. I loved what I was doing. I wasn't really looking for a job when I was on furlough. I was being smart and having conversations and talking to people and thinking about what ifs, but I loved that job, and it was something I really wanted to go back to. So I'm being smart. I'm taking some time and breathing and owning that anger and working through it because I want it to be gone before I start something new. But the new thing that's on the horizon for me is actually new. So I'm starting my own agency. It's actually called New, but it's NYOO. That's the phonetic pronunciation of the word new. And I chose that because the traditional creative marketing agency has existed the way it has, long before the times of Don Draper and the Mad Men. And it was everybody is full service and everybody can do everything and everybody has massive bloated overhead. And you've got that one key client that keeps the light on and pays the bills and really funds you to do a whole bunch of work for other smaller companies. And so my intentions with New is that I want to try to turn the agency model on its head a little bit and work largely with startups. So many startups, they have an amazing product idea or they have an amazing tech idea, but they don't really understand the marketing side of this. I mean, so often these are 23, 24-year-old geniuses coming out of school, coming out of some grad school that really have never had to work hard for anything in their life. And they're kind of finding these unique things that is not in their skill set. So my intention is to have them turn over their marketing to new. And it's a model where you only pay for what you need, because I'm only going to build a unique team for you based on what you need. So it's an agency entirely built of freelancers. I actually have access to over 37,000 freelancers worldwide. And so when we sit down and meet with you, my role is to play consultant and to play strategist and to say, okay, here's where you are in your early stages. Here's what I recommend you do next. Whether that means you need to start investing in digital marketing so that you have brand awareness when your product or your tech or whatever it is launches, whether you need to build out a strategy of how you're going to go to market because you want to pitch investors, whether you want to apply to be part of an incubator so that you get more regular, whatever it is, or if you're ready and you've got that money and you want to start spending it and you just need brand identity and visual look and web design and video design and everything that you need to go to market. I have this network of the best of the best of the best. And we pull together a team that's unique to your needs, to your project, to your specific situation. So you're not getting charged with traditional agency fees. And the great thing is it allows me to do one of the things that I love best, which is play that strategist role. And it allows me to get to work with a lot of people that I really like. I mean, it is this massive network of freelancers, but at the core of it, it's about 100 people that I've had the privilege of working with throughout my 20-year career. So I'm calling up the absolute best graphic designers that I know. I'm calling up the best UX guys and, the people, if they want to play in AI, I know people all over the space. And so I get to build these teams of former colleagues that I really respect and I know just do great work. And so every project's a little bit unique. Every project's a little bit different. Every team's going to be completely different. And so if company A comes to me and has 3 different projects, all 3 other teams will look a little bit different. And it really gives people that are looking for a second income and want to be part of that freelance network an opportunity to do that. If there's people that are kind of looking for some sort of a gap for a couple of months while they're thinking about what that next big, more full-time opportunity is for them, or if it's somebody that's just wanting to kind of somebody that's now in a stay-at-home situation as a mom or a dad, and they want to fill those couple of hours during the day while their kids are off at school, if they ever get to go back to school. And so I'm excited about it. We are all of now about 32 hours old as a business. And so a lot more coming soon. It's been kind of an exciting process because I'm learning a lot about what it means to run a startup, from how do I go and file the paperwork to form an LLC, for me, which web platform was right for me. I mean, you being in the tech space know a lot more about this, but I mean, I'm sitting there trying to do it myself. Is it GoDaddy or is it Wix or is it Squarespace or is it something that I've never even heard of? And they all seem exactly the same and all equally confusing. And I can't really decide what's going to be best for me. But I think those are all skills that are going to be really helpful for me because I'm doing a lot of the similar things that my ultimate clients will be in. I just have the benefit of being a marketer and kind of knowing what are the tools that I'm going to need. And for me, I knew that SEO is probably not going to be a really big thing for me because a lot of them was going to be referral. So I chose to not go with the one company that was offering me $100 credit for some SEO platform, but it was $3 more a month because I didn't need those types of things. So I'm excited. It's new. It's nyooagency.com. And it's nothing more than a pretty ugly one-page landing point at this point while we build everything out and kind of start ramping up.
So this is the launch message, basically.
This is the launch message. You got the exclusive.
You got
the scoop.
Take that, CNBC.
Maybe that means your Amazon link referrals for something will be a little bit more than $2 for this podcast. So you can at least buy a cup of coffee. So
if I break $2, I will buy you that coffee for sure. That is without a doubt, my man. Well, that is awesome. That's great, man. I love to see people get inspired with their loss and turn it into something else, and it sounds like what you've got there is really, really cool. If I can help out in any way, reach out, talk to me. I'm sure I will be sending a lot of people your way from a professional standpoint, because there are a lot of people out there that have really good skills that are either looking for work or they're just looking for their next contract. So that's really great that you've got that opportunity for them now. So kudos to you, man. That's great.
Thank you.
All right, so last question, the big one. What was the last thing that the Baldwins or that Brent bought off of Amazon?
I bought a heater for our pool in the backyard, and this is me attempting to use the very, very limited amount of engineering skills that I learned at Georgia Tech. I bought like one of those bucket heaters. It's a big iron rod that's supposed to go into a 5-gallon bucket and heat up water in a trough out on a farm or something. But I'm going to try to build a small floating apparatus that this thing can kind of dangle in the middle of our small above ground pool, so that when the girls go outside and play, it's not 73 degrees every morning. So, so at least if we can warm it up a little bit, it'll be more palatable, especially when I want to try to, float on something in it after a long afternoon or a long day. So
that is amazing. So you are literally building a floating heating element for your pool.
That is my goal. Yes.
That is great. That is great.
When I burn my house down, I hope it can come sleep in your closet. So,
it's a big closet. For those of you that don't know, today's podcast is being recorded in my closet versus my basement today, and so yes, it is a very big closet. There's plenty of rooms to lay down, but it's only big enough for one. So, being a family man, I don't think that's going to work.
That's tough.
So, well, Brent, this has been an awesome time. I really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate you introducing your company to us, talking to us about the brand marketing, the emotional marketing, and just your journey overall. And I wish you the best of luck, and I can't wait to see where New goes, and I can't wait to see where you end up.
Thanks, Eric. I really appreciate you having me on today.
You've been listening to Fired Before Christmas. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode and getting to know my guests better. If you'd like to learn more about our show, please find us on the web at firedbeforechristmas.com. And any questions or interest in the show, please feel free to email me at host@firedbeforechristmas.com, or again, check out our website. Until next time, I'm your host, Eric Ryan Jones, and you've been listening to Fired Before Christmas.